6 games in the SEC this weekend. We'll look at them all with our buddy Chris Marler. Does Billy Napier survive? Will Peyton Thorne throw another pick 6? Will Bama's reign at number 1 fall at Vandy? Locked On SEC starts right now.
You are Locked On SEC, your daily podcast on the Southeastern Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And what's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On SEC. It's great to have you guys along. I'm Chris Gordy. Thanks for making Locked On SEC your first listen every day. Shout out to our everydayers. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. In today's episode, brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you will get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com today to get started. We got 6 games in the SEC. And Marler, this is actually an easy week. Like, we're going to be able to spend some time on some of these games because normally, a few weeks ago, didn't we have like 11 games or something stupid? We're like having to like hustle through them all to get a mention. But I like all the teams on bye.
You know, honestly, it's the second straight week. You have 6 games on the slate. 5 of the 6 games are, 5 of the 6 games are conference games. And then the only one that's not is that for this week, the only non-conference game is Florida UCF, which may have one of the best storylines out of any game that we have in the conference this weekend. So I'm pumped, man. It should be a lot of fun. Also, real quick, every time that we think a weekend is going to suck in college football, it's awesome. Like, that happens all the time.
Yeah, no doubt. There's always, it's always when you think it's not going to be good, there's something that happens. Somebody gets upset. And by the way, I think our buddy Jay Smith from Locked On Sooners had the stat that there's been an upset in the SEC every week. So
yeah,
who will be that team this week? Let's jump into it as we start. Let's start with the number 1 team in the country, Alabama. Who saw that coming with their weird game against Georgia where they looked super dominant for half, then not so dominant, let Georgia come back. What was it, a 4-touchdown lead? They let Georgia back in, take the lead, and then they immediately take the lead back with Ryan Williams, and then need a Zabian Brown interception to seal the deal. Before we get to the game against Vandy, like, just reaction to that game. Like, I think for Bama fans, you had to be super excited, but then super sad in that fourth quarter where you're like, oh my God, are we going to blow this?
I don't know how I would have handled it. I don't like because like people have asked me, they're like, dude, what was going through your mind when that happened? And I was like, I think at that point, I could show you the bucket of Fireball that I had consumed, basically. And I think at that point, I was so I don't know how I would have processed it. Luckily, I didn't have to. I was very fired up about that. And it was a great game. Like, credit to Georgia for being able to come back in the second half. But I will say, if we're being objective here, and we will say great job in the second half, we need to also be objective and say, man, you had 10 months to get ready for that revenge game. You had that massive chip on your shoulder. Then you went to Lexington and looked like crap against Kentucky. And then you have a bye week and you come out and you get down 28-0 to a team that that has been circled on that schedule all year, more than any other game. It always is. So I felt like that was pretty embarrassing from that entire team, to be honest, for the first 30 minutes, and with Kirby Smart and that coaching staff. I mean, how many co-defensive coordinators do you need to be able to stop Kalen DeBoer? Apparently you need more.
Yeah, they did have the punt sequence in the second half, and that's where I thought kind of on Bama, like, that's where you put your foot in their throat and put them away.
I agree.
They didn't do that. And so anyway, we'll see if there's any carryover. I think we're going to see a much hungrier Georgia team the rest of the way. I think you're going to see an Alabama team that got some warts. Just because you won against Georgia doesn't mean all is well. The secondary was a little leaky there. And like we said, offensive consistency, you want to see that. But congrats to Alabama, a huge win. So let's start with them. Number 1 Alabama at 2-2 Vanderbilt, 4:15 Eastern on the SEC Network. Bama sitting at about a 22.5-point favorite, according to FanDuel. Vandy, by the way, has never beaten a top-ranked team ever. So don't know if it's going to start this weekend, but Diego Pavia this is an improved Vanderbilt team. Any other year, Marler, this would be Bama minus like 40.
It's surprising. It's only 22.5. It is the second team in a row that Bama's going to play off a bye week. Diego Pavia has been a lot of fun. Listen, he's I don't want to say fat because I don't want to fat shame anybody, especially with the current state of my metabolism, but he is husky Johnny Manziel. Like, he is fun to watch. And more so what I mean by that anything is that I feel like everybody's rooting for him. And now, you know, I feel like Manziel's kind of like universally loved. Like Pavia has been like that. He has a chance to do something that not a ton of teams have done, which is beat two of the in-state programs in the state of Alabama after what he did to Auburn last year. It should be a fun game. And listen, Vegas always knows something. It's surprising that line isn't a little bit higher, in my opinion. And we've also already seen Vandy drop a ranked Power 4 opponent at home against Virginia Tech, and then they almost went on the road and beat Mizzou. So it should be a good game. I think Bama wins. I think Bama wins big, but it will be interesting to see Kalen DeBoer in his first hangover effect game in Alabama.
What year were you born?
I'm not telling you that.
Well, because I think it was close. Vandy last beat Alabama in 1984. So you've never seen Vandy beat Alabama in your lifetime.
I have not. I don't even know if it's been close, but yeah.
By the way, I think the line is like that because I think they expect letdown spot for Bama, right? Like, I know they did the whole rat traps around the building this week, but it's how do you not have a letdown after such an emotional game a week ago? Like, yeah, I think this is probably one that's like, maybe it's like 14-3 at halftime. You're like, Bama, what's going on? And then they like pull away in the second half.
Yeah, I see that.
How about another one? This one is at night, 7:45 Eastern on SEC Network. It is 3-1 UCF at 2-2 Florida. And UCF has been sitting as the favorite this whole time, 2.5-point road favorite. Mm-hmm. The Knights are 1-5 against in-state schools, Florida, Florida State, and Miami, with their lone victory over Florida coming in a bowl game. Gators tied for 113th in the country in yards allowed. The Knights lead the Big 12 in total offense. So I don't know, man. This feels like maybe the last stand for Billy Napier. Like, find a way to win this one.
I don't want to sound like Pat McAfee, but give me Florida this weekend in the swamp at night with a week off. Go get him, man. Go get him. Go out there and save your job. Listen, the last time we saw this team out there on the field, right, it was a win against Mississippi State. Now, Mississippi State sucks, to be very clear. They are not a good football team. But one of my favorite things I've seen all season is Billy Napier with his back against the wall and going in a situation where nobody, including myself, thought that a two-quarterback system was going to work. He goes out there, throws out Burts and Lagway twice. Lagway went out there with the ball inside of his own 10-yard line. True freshman coming out there, and you still put him out in that spot. You made the decision. You stuck with it, and you were convicted in it. And all they did was go out there and put up 19-21. They had less incompletions than they did touchdowns, over 300 yards of offense. Man, I'm telling you, UCF looked bad last week. They looked really bad. And I like Florida at home in the swamp. For the love of God, Billy, go win this game.
I actually bet on that one a week ago. I thought when I saw that Colorado was an underdog against UCF, I was like, wait, the way Shador and Dion are, like, the way that he'd been playing, I was like, I think they're going to pull this off. But Florida, by the way, you're going to face KJ Jefferson. Jefferson led Arkansas to that stunning win in Gainesville just last November. Florida won the previous two meetings in Gainesville by a combined score of 100-27.
I like that. I like the second part better.
These two teams are scheduled to play again in 2030 in Orlando. And fun fact, this is the first meeting ever between Billy Napier and Gus Malzahn. So how about that one?
That's a fun fact, Gordy.
I want to lean Florida here. I want to believe in him, but every time I've picked them this year, they've lost both times.
Well, then pick the other way so Billy keeps his job.
Okay, so take UCF?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll take the Knights, and I don't feel good about that at all. But, yeah, man, I mean, some people think this could be it, though. If he loses, let's say they lose by, like, double digits, Napier could be fired next week. And it's a rough time. I mean, the schedule didn't get any easier.
The optics of it would be really bad. Like, I mean, like, the optics of losing to UCF, and that's not even, listen, UCF's not a bad football team. I know they got beat last week, but they're not a bad football team. They have a good coach. They got athletes too, because this is like, especially in the transfer portal era, a team like UCF, even though they are in a Power 4 conference now, that's a team that's going to get a lot of kids to come to Orlando and play in Florida. In addition to, like, you know, how many recruits they're going to get from in-state. So they're a good team. you got to think that at some point the athletes in Florida are able to put it together.
Yeah. I mean, where's Aaron Hernandez when you need him, you know?
He's dead.
More to come here on Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. All right, real quick, I want to remind you guys today's episode is presented to you by our friends over at FanDuel. And look, FanDuel, if you're a college football fan, NFL fan, you can start your season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Some of the games that are up there right now, we just gave you a couple of the lines. If you like Mizzou to catch the 2.5 at Texas A&M, Mizzou is an underdog, a top 10 team. You can do that over at FanDuel. If you like, I don't know, Auburn to cover the big number at Georgia right now, sitting at 22.5. There's a lot of great games you can get in on. It's over at FanDuel.com. Sign up today, download the app, and take advantage of, like we said, America's #1 sportsbook. It is FanDuel and FanDuel.com. As we dive back into it with our buddy Chris Marler on the Locked On SEC, thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. And shout out to everydayers. Keep coming back and checking us out. Join us Monday. We'll be talking about our winners and losers of the weekend. By the way, Marler, this week's winner was Mark Stoops, and that's his bourbon right there. We put his bourbon right here on set. So shout out Mark Stoops. Keep getting upsets.
Mark Stoops.
We'll keep giving you shout outs. All right, let's get to another game. This one really intrigues me. And you doing work on the Locked On Gamecocks podcast. This one's near and dear to your heart. The number 12 Ole Miss Rebels at 3-1 South Carolina. Ole Miss a 9.5-point road favorite. We saw disappointment last week at the hands of Mark Stoops as Ole Miss loses at home in just an ugly game against Kentucky, but that's how Mark Stoops likes it. Man, this one's very intriguing because earlier in the week we heard Lenore Sellers and Rocket Sanders were going to be back, and then the injury report came out the other day and it's listed both as questionable. Marla, this one feels like if South Carolina's going to have any chance to hang around this one, they got to have both those guys.
Yeah, both of them. And listen, here's the thing. I know what happened in that LSU game, but you got to have Rocket Sanders more than Sellers at this point. And it's just concerning and confusing because you just didn't expect to see it, especially after Sellers, of all people. Like, listen, he sat out the second half of that LSU game, then he sits out against Akron, then you get a bye week. So you've been gone for 2.5 weeks. Sanders comes out with an ankle sprain, I think, or something. It was like an ankle or foot injury. I've been driving all day, so I'm drawing a blank right now. But when he leads the game against,
he was walking around in a boot,
right? But it was I think more than anything, it was like precautionary, and he leaves early in the Akron game. Both those players were expected to be back full go, 100%, whatever. I think you need Sanders back more than Sellers, strictly because you have to at least assume that now after Robbie Ashford has gotten his feet wet and how he looked against Akron, I know it's Akron, you would have to at least assume that Dowell Loggins, the OC, is not going to go back to what he did against LSU, where you have to put an Ashford in the second half and you have that big lead and you throw the ball only 4 times in the second half. Like, you would have to assume he will be able to run the game plan through Ashford if he has to go. But again, you need Sanders more than anything because there's not as great of a serviceable back behind him. And the other thing that's concerning too is Jared Brown was listed as the same thing. The receiver from Coastal Carolina and formerly Parkview High School, go Panthers. I just keep going back to this, man. I don't think that Lane Kiffin is mature enough as an adult, not even just as a coach, but as an adult, to not somehow try to make this game not about the winning. Like we've seen it against Bama in 2021, go get your popcorn ready. We've seen it other times. I think he's going to try and make Juice Wells a bigger factor into this game than he needs to be. And you saw it last week. I mean, listen, they had 3 design runs to the running backs in the first half of that game. They completely went away from the stuff that's worked for them throughout the season, and it cost them a win. I don't think that he respects like the concern. Let me rephrase this. I don't think that he approaches games with the same sort of hesitancy and concern that you need to avoid quote unquote rat poison. And I think that South Carolina is going to go into that game on Saturday in front of a crowd that's going to be out for blood, that's going to be loud as hell. And here's the other thing too, Gordy, I know it's the longest answer I've ever said somehow on the show, but Ole Miss last year, right? Last year in road games, they averaged almost 20 points less per game than they did at home. And they got to go into Williams-Brice against one of the best defenses in this conference. I think South Carolina wins this game 31-30.
Wow.
I'm biased, though.
Kyle Kennard and Dylan Stewart, they've combined for 11 tackles for a loss, 8 of the team's 14 sacks. So they're going to have to be disruptive. Princely Amonmiel, and he has 5 tackles for a loss, 2.5 sacks over his last 2 games. Trey Harris, by the way, leads all of FBS with over 800 yards receiving. So
that's insane.
That's where Emanwari and O'Donnell Fortune, like those guys, you're going to have to, hey, do your thing, guys. We need you to cover him. South Carolina has lost its past 6 games against ranked opponents too. So yeah, doesn't fare well there for Shade Beamer. All right, how about at 3:30 Eastern on ABC? It is 2-3 Auburn at number 5 Georgia. Georgia a 22.5-point favorite, and I don't know, man. I keep thinking that number still isn't like name your number, Georgia. The Deep South's oldest rivalry, this game dating back to 1892. That's probably what the spread should be, minus 1892.
Let me tell you something right now. I'm recording this off North Ave in Atlanta, Georgia, right behind Pond City Market. I am talking about a stone's throw from Piedmont Park, where the first ever meeting between these two teams was played in 1892. It is my favorite rivalry in the entire country, especially in the SEC. The Deep South Souls rivalry. It's been one of the more historically close rivalries in the country. It has not been that way as of recent. Georgia's won 14 of the last 17. Here's the thing that I'm concerned about for Georgia. I think that what they did in the second half last week is great. However, slow starts have kind of plagued this team over the last year and a half under Bobo. They've been great on offense, and I don't think it's anything that's really concerned them too much because in most of those games, they find a way to win, right? They've only lost twice, and it's the same team. But for whatever reason, these slow starts, you saw it against Clemson, you saw it against Bama last week, you saw it against South Carolina a year ago, you saw it against Auburn, right? Like a year ago. Georgia is scoring 80.2% of their total points in the second half against Power 4 teams this year. In the 3 games they've had against Power 4 teams, they have scored 80% of their points in the second half. Now, that's a great job at finishing a game, but I think this fan base is a little bit uneasy and frustrated with what happened last week, and they need to come out of the gates and put Auburn away early.
Yeah, Georgia coming off their first regular season loss since 2020. Peyton Thorne has thrown 6 interceptions in 4 games played. The Bulldogs did not allow a touchdown through their first 3 games, but they give up almost 600 yards to the Crimson Tide. So it just feels like they're going to try to cut down on that. I mean, for Auburn, like, I know Kirby tried to give them the whole, I mean, I know the turnovers, but this team's moving the football. Like, look at their offensive numbers, and I get it, but, like, it's one thing, Marler, if Auburn had turned the ball over in, like, 1 game. This isn't a small sample size. Like, this is the whole season. This is who you are.
Yeah, I agree. And I tell you what, Brooks Austin on Twitter brought up a really, really good stat the other day, and I'm going to misquote it like the professional that I am. Oh boy. But he made the point. It was like, here's how many seasons each coach has had 20+ turnovers. And Hugh Freeze, I don't know how many years he's been a head coach. I think it's around 12 or 10 or 12, 8 seasons. He has had over 20 turnovers on his teams. It's a hell of a stat. I was blown away when I saw it. It's a great job by Brooks Austin, but not a great job by Hugh Freeze, man. There's only so much blame you can try to put on a scapegoat or a quarterback or whatever in this offense if those are the numbers. Because just like you said, they're getting chunk plays, but this is also not a small sample size. This is also who they are.
Yeah.
The Falcons are the worst team in franchise in the history. I hate them so much.
So do we count Hugh's year at Arkansas State?
Yeah, he's the head coach.
Do you count the year at Lambeth or the 2 years at Lambeth?
We can if it helps my narrative.
Okay. So that's 9, 10, 11, 12, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. Season is 14th year as a head coach.
Okay.
So for accuracy's sake. Hey, Cam Coleman is averaging 23.6 yards per catch. Maybe get him the football more.
Yeah, or hit him in the hands and see if he doesn't drop it like he did against Cal for those turnovers too. I mean, it's not all on Peyton Thorne, but Man, I tell you what, it's weird listening to Peyton Thorne and talk about it because like a week ago it was, man, they could have won that game and they throw a pick six. And then he's like, yeah, 10 out of 10 times, brother. Hey, how about this? How about Auburn quarterbacks, Auburn head coaches? How about we stop using the phrase blank out of 10 times? Yeah. We'll do this.
Yeah, that's not good. And I did like his explanation on the next round. Kudos to Peyton Thorne going on with those guys. And he broke down the play. He's like, it was the right play. It just, made a bad mistake, whatever. Yeah. Real quick on Hugh Freeze, because I'm looking at the rest of their schedule, and it's brutal. If he goes 4-8 or 5-7, keep in mind, Marlo, the week the season ends is the early signing period. Right now, they're sitting with a top 5 recruiting class. If he goes 4-8, but as a top 5 recruiting class, he gets another year, right?
Oh, he gets another year no matter what. They were so emotionally beaten down by Harsin. They are going to give him another year no matter what. But, brother, it's concerning. It is like – because here's the deal. All the excuses that Harsin didn't get, you're giving to Freeze, and he's recruiting well. But the other thing that is maybe it's unfair or not, but it's also something consistent is Auburn has competed and is very used to quick turnarounds. It's not just them being totally irrational and expecting too much too early. Since Pat Dye was the head coach, they have competed for a title or had an undefeated season in the first 3 years of every single head coach except for Brian Harsin. Like whether it was a division title, conference title, or national title, they have done that or gone undefeated every single of the first 3 years. I don't know what happens in year 3 under Freeze, but I mean, man, if they go 4-8, I would be shocked if they finished with a top 5 class.
Yeah, to save some of that money you're spending on recruits and go get you a damn quarterback in 2025. Really? All right, still more to come here on Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day. First, I want to remind you guys today's episode presented to you by our friends over at the Game Time app. Look, Game Time, they got a new feature called Game Time Picks. It makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. They're going to filter out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so you don't have time to waste searching through thousands of tickets. I had some friends who bought tickets to a playoff baseball game the other day, and they used the Game Time app. They loved the feature that I love, the all-in pricing. You toggle that feature on, shows your total up front. No surprise fees to check out, exactly what you're going to pay. And of course, the seat views. You get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Go download the Game Time app today, create an account, use our code LOCKEDONCollege, get $20 off your first purchase. If you've never used them before, terms apply. Create an account, redeem our code LOCKEDONCollege, get $20 off. Download Game Time today. And as I always say, what time is it? It is game time. As we jump back into it with our buddy Chris Marler going around the SEC previewing the games this weekend. Marler, 11 a.m. Central on ABC. It is number 9 Mizzou at number 25 Texas A&M. People kind of crowning this the game of the week as number 9 Mizzou hits the road for the first time this season. They're looking to extend their 8-game win streak and improve to 5-0 for a second straight year. But the Aggies, they've been good. Marcel Reed at quarterback. He's undefeated so far as their QB. And the Aggies tie for first in the SEC with takeaways, 7 interceptions, rather. Marcus Ratcliffe leads the way with 3 of them. I don't know. The more I start to look at this, I wonder if A&M is, I still think they're kind of borderline top 25 team. I don't know if they should be ranked, but, man, this line has been sitting all week. A&M is a 2.5-point favorite.
They should not be ranked, I don't think. But I will say this. Marcel Reed is one of my favorite players to watch in this conference. He's going to make some dumb mistakes. Right. He's going to make some dumb mistakes. He reminds me of an almost better Bo Nix his freshman year. I remember there was a buddy of mine who used to make this quote, and he said, listen, Bo Nix is an incredible person to watch his freshman year. This is 2019 when he would say he's going to do 3 to 5 things a game that you just are like, will blow your mind. Like, oh my God, what an elite talent. What an incredible, what an athletic play that not a ton of people can make. He's also going to 3 to 5 times a game do something that makes you be like, what the hell are you doing right now? And I think it's Marcel Reed a little bit. It's also like, Taylor Green. I like Marcel Reed. I think he's going to be a really good quarterback. This team's already proven they can lose to top 10 caliber opponents at home. Mizzou is coming off a bye. They are 4-1 under Eli Drinkwitz coming off a bye. The only loss was that game to Georgia last year where they were in it the whole time. I like Mizzou to come in and put a stamp on like there's not a lot of games on this schedule that they're going to be able to use as like a feather in their cap or in their resume for the college football playoff. This is one of them. I like Mizzou to win and cover the 3.5 might be my lock of the week.
Yeah, it's 2.5. Yeah, it's
3.5 though. It opened, right?
Yeah, well, it's in at 2.5. But the Aggies, they have held opponents to 100 yards rushing or less in 3 straight games. So Noel and Carroll, we'll see if they're able to move the football. Mizzou ranks 3rd nationally in total defense, giving up just 219 per game. I like Levy and Moss, though, man. That ground game for A&M, they've really gotten going. He's one of the top 10 rushers in the SEC right now. And how about this for a stat, Marler? Do you know Luther Burden has all of Mizzou's receiving touchdowns this year? They have not thrown a touchdown to anybody else.
Where's Mookie Cooper? Like what happened to Mookie Cooper? That's tough.
Yeah, it's it'll be an interesting one to see. I'm sticking. Go ahead.
My bad. Did you know that Luther Burden is 17?
No, he's not.
No, I shouldn't even set up that joke. I interrupted you twice to do it. It's a real big failure.
God, if I hear one more time about Ryan Williams, I'm convinced he's 27 in a 17-year-old body.
I am 12.
Who runs those routes? Like, who goes dead leg? Like, he went stanky leg on double coverage. And
I would have pulled everything in my back on that catch. Everything.
All right. The other one, and this one is, to me, this is the most intriguing game of the week because this is the, we said it when they went to Oklahoma, but is Tennessee for real? 6:30 Central on ABC. Number 4 Tennessee at 3-2 Arkansas in Fayetteville. Vol sitting at about a 13.5 point favorite. Tennessee has lost their last 3 visits playing Arkansas in Fayetteville. I did not realize that one.
Does Tennessee get to play home games ever? Like, what is going on? Like, they are the opposite of Michigan. They have done a really good job so far. And I think the scary part for anyone else that's watching this team is really good. I personally, before the Bama win over Georgia, I thought they have been the best team in the conference with how they've looked. They've been great on offense. They've been great on defense. They're top 5 and nationally in both things. Like one of the only 2 teams in the country that are able to are in that top 5. I think it's them and Ohio State. Maybe I could be wrong. Shout out Cole Kublik for another stat that I have now misused.
Yeah, it's one thing to credit Cole for a stat. It's another thing to get it wrong and credit.
Oh yeah. Hey, listen, I praised Brooks Austin for his stat that I read wrong the whole time, so I did the right thing. No, I think that Tennessee is really good. The scary part about Tennessee, if you are on the outside of looking in of Knoxville, is that they're nowhere close, dude. They're nowhere close to how good they could be. Like, and they haven't been at home for hardly any of their games. Definitely not in their tough games. So think about that, what that's going to look like when they finally do get to go home and play teams like Alabama and some of these other matchups that they get, like, in Neyland Stadium. That game at Georgia is going to be tough for sure. But I'm just very high on Tennessee, man. It's scary to think about what their potential could be and their ceiling could be once they aren't on the road. And also once Nico finally gets it going, because he's made some, I wouldn't say uncharacteristic mistakes, but stuff that young quarterbacks make. And I think the ceiling is so high for him, and he's got so much talent around him. I am painfully so high on Tennessee. I think they go in there and win. It might be close early. But I think they're able to pull away late because that defense is really, really tough.
Yeah, I was reading the stat. I don't know if this is real. It says Arkansas the last time they beat a team ranked in the top 5 at home was 1999. That can't be right. That's got to be against the top 5.
That must be Fayetteville because the LSU games were played in Little Rock.
You're probably right. And in 07, LSU was won when Darren McFadden and those guys beat them in triple overtime. So
yeah, I think that game was in LSU though.
We get a little weird with the stats sometimes when we're like during a harvest moon on a Saturday, this team is 1-16.
Yeah.
Like what?
I make them up, so I don't really care.
Tennessee does get their starting offensive tackles back. Lance Hurd and John Campbell. Arkansas starting corner Jalen Braxton will miss a 4th straight game. Hudson Clark, the safety, is expected to come back. Tennessee leads the country, allowing 176 yards of offense per game. I mean, this is a different Tennessee defense. Yeah. They also allowed just 2 plays of 30 yards or longer, a 30-yard run, and a 46-yard pass. That's the fewest in the SEC and tied for second fewest in the country.
Granted, well, actually, I was gonna say they've had a week off, but Bama and Georgia, I think, were the same before last week. Georgia had allowed 2 all year. That is clearly over, and Bama had allowed 3. But that's what I'm saying. We talk so much about the Tennessee offense under Josh Heupel teams. The defense has been outstanding, and they're only going to get better, I think. The other thing too is I love Taylor Green. I think he's so much fun to watch. He reminds me of a modern day Matt Jones. I brought it up on the podcast on here with you last week. He's tall, he's lanky, he can run, and he will make plays, but he just is sometimes lackadaisical with the football, whether it be on snaps. And you saw it last week. It showed up.
Lit him up at one point. He was like, dude, take care of the damn football.
And you saw it. I remember seeing it against Oklahoma State at first, because it was it almost looks like he's not even looking at the snap at times. He's so casual and relaxed back there, because he is, a lot of times when he steps on the field, he's going to be the best athlete on the field. But he's got to be a little bit more aware between the ears, I think, going out there, especially in the game against Tennessee. You saw it rear its ugly head last week against against A&M, when he had 3 fumbles and two of them were lost. He's got to get better, but I do think he's a really, really good quarterback, and they will be able to come up with plays. They will.
Arkansas running back Jaquindon Jackson, by the way, he got bottled up against A&M, but he still leads the conference in rushing. Dylan Sampson, not far behind him, and Tennessee's rushing game ranks 4th nationally in the country. So pretty strong there. Do you like the Vols to cover the 13.5?
I do. I wouldn't be surprised either way. This game will be a lot of fun, but I do think Tennessee will cover, especially coming off the bye, man.
He is Chris Marler. Thank you guys for, by the way, Tennessee next 4 games, they're at home. So they finally get to come back home. Thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. Hey, for your second listen, check out Chris Marler Locked On Gamecocks, where he's got you covered there. Calling for the upset of Lane Kiffin. If Lane Kiffin loses his second one this early, he's going to be the Florida head coach, because they're going to run him out of town.
I don't hate that call at all.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition. Marler, thanks for the time, man. We'll do it again next week.
Sounds good, brother.
All right, that's going to do it for this edition of Locked On SEC. Again, thank you guys for making us your first listen every day. We'll be back on Monday with our winners and losers of the weekend. Make sure you come on back and check us out right here on Locked On SEC, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, covering your team every day.